Reflection, rather than cacophony, marks Chuck Negron's passing. It asks for a moment to reflect on how deeply a single human voice can become ingrained in the collective memory without ever needing to be acknowledged. His singing was meant to connect, not to impress. Negron was a driving factor behind Three Dog Night, helping to establish a sound that was emotive and inclusive. His voice was genuine, never concealed by skill alone, because it felt authentic, imperfect, emotive, and alive. Listeners trusted it. Negron's life developed in a complicated way outside of the music. Wisdom came later, but success came first. His narrative reflects the reality that many people choose not to face. Growth frequently follows collapse. Honoring him entails honoring the artist as well as the man, not as a perfect icon, but as a person who led an honest life. All things become softer with time, with the exception of music that speaks truthfully. Since Chuck Negron's voice was never based on illusion, it has withstood the test of time, experience, emotion, and the desire to feel deeply, even when it hurt, shaped it. His experience serves as a reminder that leaving a legacy is more about what comes after mistakes than it is about preventing them. Negron chose introspection over remorse as he confronted his own shortcomings and came out of them humble. His music gained depth as a result of his bravery, which enabled listeners to perceive life itself in addition to sound. His songs are still being heard today, passing down from one generation to the next and from one memory to the next. They coexist with the present rather than as artifacts from the past. Even though Chuck Negron's voice has stopped speaking, its meaning has not. It endures in the subtle awareness that certain artists never really go away. They just alter how they are perceived. All things become softer with time, with the exception of music that speaks truthfully. Since Chuck Negron's voice was never based on illusion, it has withstood the test of time. Experience, emotion, and the desire to feel deeply, even when it hurt, shaped it. His experience serves as a reminder that leaving a legacy is more about what comes after mistakes than it is about preventing them. Negron chose introspection over remorse as he confronted his own shortcomings and came out of them humble. His music gained depth as a result of his bravery, which enabled listeners to perceive life itself in addition to sound. His songs are still being heard today, passing down from one generation to the next and from one memory to the next. They coexist with the present rather than as artifacts from the past. Even though Chuck Negron's voice has stopped speaking, its meaning has not. It endures in the subtle awareness that certain artists never really go away. They just alter how they are perceived. Chuck Negron's biggest gift was ultimately emotion rather than fame. His music provided solace in times of joy, loneliness, introspection, and hope that people did not always know how to describe. His life is a lesson that it is never too late to face one's past, grow, adapt, and communicate honestly. This transparency allowed his legacy to grow with his music, giving his later years a peaceful dignity. Now, when listeners revisit his tunes, they do so with a greater comprehension. What used to sound happy now conveys thankfulness. It feels timeless now, instead of nostalgic. Instead of leaving this planet in quiet, Chuck Negron leaves behind continuity, a voice that travels to all places where people are still willing to listen. The loss of a voice you've known your entire life, even if you've never met the person who spoke it, leaves you with a certain type of stillness. It's neither loud nor abrupt. It settles softly, almost courteously, as though it's waiting for you to realize that something that was once constant has changed. This is the quiet that Chuck Negron left behind. Negron's death at the age of 83 feels more like the silent closing of a door that had been open for decades than the end of a career. His voice, which was so strongly associated with Three Dog Night's essence, was not only a part of the history of popular music, but also of people's emotional lexicon. It sang of longing without exaggeration, joy without conceit, and suffering without theatrics. The news is significant to people who grew up listening to his songs because it is personal rather than shocking. They had previously experienced childhood, adulthood, heartbreaks, comebacks, and times of introspection with Chuck Negron's voice. Losing him is like losing a narrator for chapters you were unaware were being written. An organic voice in an unnatural sector. Chuck Negron's vocal prowess was never based on showmanship. He didn't act like he was attempting to control a space. Rather, his voice beckoned listeners in. He sang in a way that seemed incredibly natural, as though emotion flowed from him effortlessly. Negron stands out for his ability to maintain emotional openness in a field that frequently promotes loudness over vulnerability. His voice was honest, warm, and full of substance. It sounded as though it was learning alongside the listener rather than acting as though it knew everything. That trait served as Three Dog Night's emotional core. The sound of connection and Three Dog Night came into being during a period of rapid change in music. Artists were starting to experiment with identity and expression. Audiences were growing and genres were merging. The band provided something grounded in this shifting environment, music that seemed approachable without being superficial. That accessibility was underpinned by Negron's voice. It transformed songs into communal encounters. The band had enormous popularity, but emotional relatability rather than trend-driven appeal was what kept it going. People lived with Three Dog Night. They didn't just listen to it. The significance of the applause pressure followed success, and pressure led to flight. Negron was unprepared for the psychological toll of celebrity, as were many artists of his time. The lifestyle that surrounds achievement frequently made it difficult to distinguish between self-destruction and celebration. Addiction entered his life gradually, eroding his equilibrium rather than becoming a sensational scandal. His job, sense of self, and health were all impacted. It threatened, for a while, to stifle the very voice that had given him recognition. Negron's story endures not because of the fall, but because of the candor with which he dealt with it afterward. Loss of control and the pursuit of meaning. When Negron was at his lowest, he had to confront the horrifying prospect that music, which was the only thing that made him unique, might no longer be sufficient to save him. Once intoxicating, fame seemed empty. Applause was no longer consoling. A reckoning was compelled by these moments. He could either go away in silence or face himself head-on. He opted for conflict. Recuperation as reinvention. Negron's comeback was neither spectacular nor dramatic. It was incredibly human, sluggish, and uncomfortable. It called for humility, which is a quality that fame seldom imparts. He started reconstructing his life from the inside out via recovery and introspection. His conception of success was altered by this process. Success was no longer determined by charts or ticket sales, but rather by consistency, visibility, and clarity. He came out as a man who learned to live with his history rather than one who was chasing it. Life. Outside of the spotlight, Negron reduced his frequent public appearances in his senior years. He altered his relationship with music, but he did not give it up. Singing evolved from a duty to an expression. He talked more candidly about self-responsibility, addiction, and recovery. Those fans who had grown up with him found great significance in these discussions. A different, more lasting bond was made possible by his vulnerability. Marriage, love, and personal power notoriety could never give Negron the emotional stability that his lengthy marriage gave him. His private life was purposefully kept private, while a large portion of his public life was closely examined. He was able to rediscover himself beyond what the public expected, thanks to this equilibrium. Once elusive, stability came to define his later character. A voice that grew older, with its listeners. Being able to age your work without losing its relevancy is one of the rarest accomplishments in music. Chuck Negron accomplished this by being emotionally honest rather than by changing his sound. His music became more and more clear to listeners as they grew older. Once lighthearted lyrics took on a deeper meaning. Once connected to youth, melodies have come to represent perseverance. His listeners grew up with his voice. The last chapter. There are no unanswered questions following Chuck Negron's passing. Despite its complexity, his life feels full. He confronted his challenges. He told it like it was. He was at peace. This wholeness is reflected in the tributes that followed his passing. They are about his humanity as much as his skill. Fans recall how his voice made them feel less alone, safe, and understood. Conclusion: what happens after the song is over memory starts as soon as the music ends. Chuck Negron's legacy continues in the poignant moments people hold in silence, not only in recordings and honors, in songs that come up out of nowhere, in tunes that evoke memories of their former selves. He left evidence that voices do not vanish along with bodies. They merely relocate to a new area that is influenced more by memory than by performance. Being the loudest was never the goal of Chuck Negron's voice. It was about being there. And wherever music is felt rather than just heard, that soft, genuine presence will still reverberate.